Hello, I'm Elise Vance, the author of the channel Borrowed Lives, and I offer you fascinating stories. Like and subscribe to my channel.
I was born with the brain power of a single bag of wet cement. My physical body simply refuses to utter a lie. While I was at the admissions desk processing my transfer to the elite St. Jude Academy of Fine Arts, my mom rang my phone, her voice shaking with secondhand embarrassment. "Beatrix, sweetie, just try your best to fit in. If your head starts aching from thinking too hard, take a break. Just don't embarrass us in front of the board." "Do you remember which studio room you were assigned to?" "Studio 9. I announced with the pride of a seasoned astronaut. I had chanted that room number 50 times in the mirror before leaving our modest apartment. There was zero chance I'd drop the ball. Silence filled the line. I could literally hear the heavy weight of her regret down the receiver. "I should have never let your uncle take custody of you during middle school. That eccentric old lunatic completely ruined your social survival skills." But I adored Uncle Barnaby. Other adults constantly mumbled that I was a few bricks short of a load, that my brain was running on low battery. Only Uncle Barnaby hyped me up. "My little bee is a financial genius. She memorized the security code to my master safe. Yesterday, she ordered 40 vintage electric guitars on credit. Can your kids pull off a stunt like that?" Absolutely not. Mom used to preach that sugar would melt my insides, but I would press my nose against the bakery glass until Uncle Barnaby bought out the entire display case. "Eat up, kiddo. I don't believe a few pastries can dissolve human bones." Later, while I was wailing like a banshee in the orthodontist's chair, my uncle wasn't mad at me. He was furious at basic biology. "It's your parents' fault. Terrible DNA. They pass down weak enamel and won't even let a kid enjoy a donut. B, promise me you'll always tell the brutal truth. Don't be a fake like your parents. Bad genetics and hypocrites who ban jelly-filled treats." I gave him a solemn nod. From that afternoon on, I never gave anyone a fake story. When our landlord, Mr. Vance, was passionately kissing a woman who wasn't his wife behind the garage, Mrs. Vance asked if I had seen where he went. I gave her the raw facts. Yep. They said they were taking his sports car to the downtown motel to wrap up their afternoon date. By midnight, Mr. Vance lost his classic car collection, the house, and his dignity, while Mrs. Vance left town with a massive smile and a fat divorce check. When the cardiologist strictly instructed Uncle Barnaby to stop eating salty cured meats and asked if he was sneaking salami into the house, I stayed loyal to the truth. Uncle eats prosciutto every single night at midnight. He hides the cured meats inside the grand piano. Uncle Barnaby's jaw dropped. He got chewed out by the medical staff for 40 minutes straight. When we walked out into the lobby, he raised his fist like he was going to swatter me, but instead, he just patted my hair. "Next time I stash the snacks, I'll make sure you aren't in the same state." By the time my mom reclaimed me, my social filter was completely destroyed. She wiped her eyes, looking defeated. She was already slow, but that stubborn old man turned her into a walking hazard. How is she going to survive in the real world without getting sued or beaten up? I blinked my big, clueless eyes. "Mom, you can take out a hefty life insurance policy on me and list yourself as the beneficiary. Uncle Barnaby took out a policy on you and Dad. I'm the primary recipient. He said if you guys kick the bucket in a strange accident, I'll be wealthy enough to never have to work a day in my life." Mom stopped weeping instantly. Uncle Barnaby adjusted his glasses. The two of them argued in the kitchen for hours. Mom eventually calmed down, though Uncle Barnaby refused to back down. Honesty is leverage. Only genuine people attract real friends. Beatrix will never get taken for a ride. So, at my previous vocational school, when that massive incident occurred, I didn't fabricate a story. My reward for telling the absolute truth was an immediate expulsion and a transfer ticket here. I tried not to dwell on the dark stuff. I threw a fist in the air. "Don't panic, Mom. I've got this." Before the call disconnected, I caught my mom muttering under her breath. I literally printed out the paper that said Studio 1. Where did her brain drop the ball? Studio 1? Whatever. "Miss Vance, complete these emergency registration forms," the admissions administrator commanded, sliding a clipboard over. I brushed off my mom's doubts and scribbled my details down. But the moment the administrator caught sight of Studio 9 written on my page, her face drained of color. She looked at me like I was a ghost floating through the lobby. On the walk down the main hallway, she leaned in and whispered nervously, "If anything bizarre happens, if anyone threatens you, report it directly to my office." She bit her lip, trying to word her warning carefully. Third-year Studio 9. They don't tolerate dead weight. Every student in that room has to prove their worth. Wait, I have to do actual labor? I thought this was just art class. I strolled past the main disciplinary bulletin board. It was basically a hall of fame dedicated entirely to Studio 9. Studio 9. Chloe Vance dressed up as a grotesque gargoyle and threw glitter bombs from the roof during midnight hours. Traumatized 8 freshmen and 3 faculty members into temporary leave. Major suspension. Studio 9. Arthur Pendleton attempted to buy out the university board's shares to declare himself Supreme Chancellor of the Fine Arts Department. Psychological evaluation pending. Studio 9. Silas Vance set fire to the bronze sculpture gallery and tried to pin it on the department chair for insurance fraud. Wow. My new studio mates were overflowing with artistic passion. I walked in during the morning recess. The room was mostly deserted. I definitely couldn't pull off the wild stunts listed on that bulletin board. Setting fires seemed way too technical. So, to prove I wasn't just dead weight, I grabbed an oversized floor broom and began sweeping up sawdust. I stopped abruptly when a pair of pristine crocodile skin loafers blocked my path. I glanced up. The girl standing over me was drop-dead gorgeous, like an airbrushed supermodel straight out of a high-fashion magazine spread. She looked at my worn shoes, sneered, and crossed her arms. "If you're applying for the janitorial staff, the supply closet is down the hall. You're ruining my aesthetic. Move." I stepped aside without arguing. But as our shoulders brushed, zap, a sharp crack of static electricity flew between us. Her eyes widened in absolute horror. She stared at my sleeve. "Is that cheap synthetic wool? Families with a net worth under 20 million aren't even allowed on this campus wing. How in the world did a penniless beggar like you get past security?" She squinted, looking genuinely baffled. I answered with zero hesitation, because my uncle died trying to fix the school's high-voltage generator. He traded his life so I could get a transfer scholarship here. "I didn't mean to shock you. This is the new coat my uncle bought me before the incident. He wanted me to wear it on my first day. Sadly, he never got to see it. He was way too stubborn. The technicians begged him not to touch the main grid, but he had to flex. "I don't believe 400 volts can stop a 60-year-old legend like me," he shouted. Then he got fried. I never saw him wake up again. I looked down at my shoes solemnly. Chloe's sneer completely melted away. She clutched her chest, her voice shaking with sudden guilt. Arthur, I feel sick to my stomach. My heart is pounding." A tall, lean guy with a razor-sharp jawline and a charismatic smile strolled over. He looked like an indie film star mixed with a cold-blooded mastermind. This was Arthur. "Chloe, you're an absolute monster," Arthur said softly, his tone icy. "Picking at an orphan's tragic backstory? You really should set an alarm for 3 a.m. just to wake up and slap yourself across the face." Chloe looked like she was about to throw up from sheer shame. She stumbled backward into her velvet armchair. I blinked, confused. Who is she picking on? Arthur stared down at me like I was an unidentified deep-sea creature. "Find your easel, Vance," the professor announced, walking into the studio. The only vacant workspace was directly behind Chloe, right next to a guy who was fast asleep over a massive wooden desk. I pulled up a stool and sat down. The guy beside me stirred, stretching lazily. When he turned his head, holy smokes. He was destructively attractive. Like the kind of handsome that ruins your financial stability and peace of mind all at once. My eyes sparkled. Everyone in this department was so visually blessed. My desk neighbor, Silas, glared at me with pitch-black, brooding eyes. He looked thoroughly irritated. "Keep your head facing front. Don't cross into my workspace. Don't push my buttons, or I'll make you wish you were never enrolled here." I shuddered slightly. "You sound just like my Uncle Barnaby. He used to threaten people with physical destruction all the time. Can I call you Uncle Silas?" Silas gave me the exact same. What kind of absurd creature is this look Arthur had given me earlier? He shoved his chair back a few inches just to distance himself from my stupidity. Stay far away from me. And do not call me uncle, he growled through clenched teeth, a subtle crimson blush creeping up his neck. He was just shy. I decided to be a polite classmate and not point out his red ears. Nobody was actually listening to the art history lecture. Everyone was glued to their smartphones, either trading crypto or scrolling through private messaging groups. The professor blatantly turned a blind eye. Suddenly, Silas's phone blasted a loud, obnoxious defeat sound effect at full volume through the silent room. The professor snapped around. Who was playing mobile games during my lecture? Silas leaned in dangerously close, his warm breath hitting my ear, his voice low and threatening. The professor is going to interrogation mode. If you throw me under the bus, I will mess you up beyond repair. My face flushed hot pink. Right here in the middle of class? I whispered back, horrified. That seems completely inappropriate. I haven't even reviewed the human anatomy textbook for that kind of practical demonstration. Silas froze mid-breath. His brain visibly short-circuited. Beatrix Vance, the professor barked, marching down the aisle. Was your neighbor Silas playing games on his phone? Silas glared at me, his eyes promising absolute devastation. But I physically cannot lie. Yes, Professor. He just lost 15 ranked matches in a row. He's terrible at it, but he refuses to quit. Also, he just threatened to give me a private biology demonstration right on this desk. A heavy hand slammed firmly over my mouth. It was warm and smelled faintly of expensive cologne and tobacco. Disregard her. It was me. I was streaming video clips. Take me to the dean. Silas whipped out his phone, surrendering instantly. Before the professor dragged him out by his collar, Silas shot me a glare sharp enough to cut glass. Exposing my losing streak in front of everyone? You're a dead girl walking, rookie. I blinked. Was he mad about his game stats or the biology thing? The rest of the studio began whispering instantly. Chloe spun around in her chair, eyes wide. You're completely done for. You just poked the school king. Your life here is over. But if he tries to ruin you, beg me nicely and I might consider protecting you, kid. I immediately folded my hands together in mock prayer. Please, big sister Chloe, keep me safe. Chloe lifted her chin arrogantly and tossed a thick envelope of crisp cash onto my desk. Protection money, she coughed, looking away. Go buy some decent art supplies that aren't made of synthetic plastic. Protection money means people pay me? I gasped. This school is unbelievable. From across the aisle, Arthur snorted loudly. What a liar, he snickered. You desperately want to play the generous patron, but you're too stubborn to admit you feel bad for her. Who wants to play patron? I just have too much disposable cash and my wallet was getting heavy. Shut your mouth, Arthur. Chloe shrieked. I reached across the gap and gently pinched Chloe's lower lip. They aren't hard at all. Chloe's lips are super soft. Arthur, don't spread lies. Chloe's face turned the color of a ripe strawberry. What on earth are you doing? Defending your honor. She turned even redder, looking like she was about to explode. The professor marched back into the studio, looking like he wanted to chug a whole bottle of hard liquor. No physical contact in class, Chloe. Beatrix, out. Go stand in the hallway with Silas. I picked up my oversized broom and marched into the hallway like a convict carrying evidence. Silas was already leaning against the marble wall with his arms crossed, one designer shoe propped up against the paint, looking like a high-end villain who had just lost 15 gaming matches in a row. He saw me approaching and his scowl deepened. You exposed my losing streak, my phone privileges, and whatever the hell that practical biology disaster was. I stood next to him obediently. I only answered the professor's question. Besides, you're the one who brought up the biology demo. His eye twitched violently. I was threatening you with physical violence. Oh. I nodded slowly. Uncle Barnaby used to mix up his words when he got emotional, too. Once he told our kitchen microwave he was going to bury it 6 feet deep. Silas turned his head very slowly to look at me. Stop comparing me to your dead uncle. Okay. Uncle Barnaby was much sweeter anyway. For a second, I genuinely thought he was going to lose his mind. Instead, The tips of his ears flushed a dark, fiery red. That was intriguing. Maybe School Kings had surprisingly weak blood pressure. He took a step closer, attempting to loom over me. His shadow completely covered my shoes. Listen to me carefully, Vance. If you keep running your mouth in Studio 9, someone is going to make you cry real tears. I looked up into his eyes. He really was dangerously handsome when he was angry. Dark eyes, sharp jawline, messy hair falling over his forehead like rich people had access to better gravity. You look extremely attractive when you're mad, I stated simply. It makes your threats really hard to take seriously. Silas froze solid. His mouth opened, closed, and opened again. 0 words came out. Wow. I completely broke his brain without even touching him. Uncle Barnaby would have been so proud. The studio door suddenly swung open. The professor took one look at us standing way too close together and seemed to age 10 years in a single second. Beatrix. Silas. Keep a professional distance. Silas leaped backward as if I had suddenly caught fire. I held up both hands defensively. We weren't doing any biology work. He was only threatening me with words this time. The professor closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. Both of you, get back inside before I hand in my resignation and join a monastery. When we walked back in, everyone stared at us, as if we had been missing for 3 whole seasons. Chloe twisted around instantly. Did he lay a hand on you? No. He only used his vocabulary. Silas threw himself back into his armchair and buried his face in both hands. Arthur leaned across the aisle, his smile slow and malicious. So, the studio king failed his first interrogation? Shut up, Arthur. I sat down and smoothed my skirt. Someone from the back row raised their hand. Beatrix, can you seriously not tell a lie? Yes, it's a physical limitation. Who in the studio has the worst attitude? I glanced around the room. Silas. But Chloe is a very close second. Chloe gasped dramatically. Who secretly acts nice while pretending to be cruel? Chloe. I answered instantly. I do not, she yelled. Your lips say no, but your cash envelope says, Big Sister. The entire studio erupted into chaos. Chloe slammed her hands on her desk. I am not your big sister. You gave me protection money. That was an intervention for your terrible wardrobe. Arthur laughed so hard he almost dropped his tablet. Another student pointed at him. Who's the most unhinged person here? Arthur, I replied. He smiled when the disciplinary board scheduled his psychological evaluation. Arthur touched his chest gracefully. Finally, the artistic recognition I deserve. The questions kept flying at me like rapid fire. Who is the absolute worst hair? Department Chair Wilson. Who is pretending not to have feelings for someone? I looked directly at Silas. He went rigid as a board. Don't you dare. I blinked. Okay. The whole class held its breath. Silas kicked the leg of my stool lightly. Vance. See? I told the room. He told me not to, so I respected his personal privacy. Uncle Barnaby always said consent is key, especially after the dentist touched his gums without warning. The professor turned toward the window, looking like he was contemplating jumping out. Then someone in the middle row asked a question that shifted the entire mood of the room. Beatrix, what really happened to your uncle? The laughter faded instantly. I stopped swinging my feet. Uncle Barnaby died trying to fix St. Jude Academy's electrical power grid, I said quietly. Chloe's fake smile completely vanished. Arthur slowly closed his tablet screen halfway. Silas stopped pretending to stare at his phone. I thought everyone knew I continued into the quiet room. The administration offered me a transfer spot. Mom cried a lot. Adults signed endless stacks of papers. Uncle Barnaby got a memorial service with a photograph where his teeth looked completely crooked. He was working as a maintenance temp. He was on maintenance duty? Arthur's voice lost its playful edge. No, he was retired. But the Academy's official electrician didn't show up that morning. Uncle Barnaby volunteered because he used to work on heavy machinery. He said a wealthy art school shouldn't have studio lights flickering like a cheap motel sign. Chloe's face turned ghostly white. I kept talking because no one explicitly asked me to stop. The main fuse box was totally rusted out. Uncle Barnaby warned them the high-voltage lines were exposed. He shouted, "I don't believe 400 volts can stop a 60-year-old legend like me." Then it happened. Silas's hands clenched into tight fists. The school reported that he acted recklessly on his own accord. Mom couldn't understand the legal jargon on the settlement form. Neither could I. They told us my uncle was careless, but Uncle Barnaby told my mom the department chair was cheaper than gas station sushi. Arthur opened his laptop all the way. I looked over at him. "Are we doing class assignments?" His charismatic smile turned sharp and cold. "Yes, criminal investigation assignments." Before the lunch bell rang, I was summoned directly to the department chair's private office. The professor looked like he wanted to escort me, but a student had just launched a paper glider that unfolded into a fake resignation letter, so he was trapped choosing between enforcing order and giving up entirely. Department Chair Wilson's office smelled of expensive leather, oak wood, and pure deception. He stood behind his mahogany desk with a smile that displayed far too many teeth. "Beatrix Vance, please take a seat." I sat down neatly. He folded his hands over his desk. "How are you settling into St. Jude Academy?" "Terribly. I got sent to the hallway on my very first morning. But Chloe gave me cash, so it evens out." His smile twitched subtly. "I've received reports that you've been spreading stories regarding your late uncle." "Yes. Beatrix, you're young. You might not fully grasp adult legalities." "I don't grasp property taxes either, but Uncle Barnaby said they're just legalized extortion with official stamps." Department Chair Wilson took a slow, controlled breath. He opened a manila folder and slid a printed document across the desk toward me. "This is simply a clarification release. It confirms that your uncle entered the electrical vault without clearance, acted negligently, and St. Jude Academy bears zero liability. Your mother reviewed a draft earlier. Since you are the scholarship recipient, we require your signature of acknowledgement." I read the lines slowly. I wasn't the fastest reader, but Uncle Barnaby used to make me practice big legal words. Negligent. Unauthorized. Fully liable. I raised my eyes. "Thank you for the explanation, but the wire casing was eroded, the breaker panel was rusted shut, and the safety inspection log was altered after the fact." Uncle Barnaby said even a blind raccoon could spot the negligence. The chair's fake smile vanished completely. "Who told you such a thing?" "Uncle Barnaby, right before he collapsed. He called my mom and yelled for 10 minutes straight. Mom was sobbing, telling him not to touch anything. He touched it anyway because his pride was bigger than his self-preservation." The chair leaned over the desk, his eyes narrowing. "Beatrix, listen to me very carefully. Spreading unverified claims can destroy your future. You were expelled from your last institution. You certainly don't want another permanent black mark on your record, do you?" My hands gripped the fabric of my skirt tightly. I remembered my mom weeping at our kitchen table. I remembered the cheap flowers at the funeral home. I remembered relatives whispering that Beatrix was too stupid to keep her mouth shut. Maybe Mom was right. Maybe the world would crush me because I physically couldn't lie. The chair pushed a sleek fountain pen toward me. "Sign the release." I stared at the black ink on the page. "You want me to sign a paper saying my uncle died because he was stupid?" His expression turned stone cold. "That is not what the document states. But that's what it means. Sign it, Beatrix." "No." The words slipped out smaller than I intended. I straightened my back and repeated it louder. "No. My uncle died because this school was too cheap to pay for real repairs." The office door swung wide open. Silas stood in the doorway, hands shoved into his pockets, his expression dark and menacing. Behind him, Arthur was leaning against the doorframe like he had bought front-row tickets to a show. Chloe stood right beside them, wearing oversized sunglasses indoors for no discernible reason. Department Chair Wilson straightened up immediately. "This is a private administrative meeting." Silas walked straight into the room. "If she signs a single piece of paper, I'm calling my family's corporate legal team." I turned to him and whispered, "Are we best friends now?" "No," he snapped. "Then why are you defending me?" Silas refused to look at me. "Nobody bullies the idiot except me." A warm feeling bloomed in my chest. That sounds like a contract of lifelong protection. Silas's ears instantly flushed bright crimson again. Chloe grabbed me by the sleeve and pulled me toward the door. "Come on, charity case. We're leaving." The chair's voice cracked like a snapping whip. "Miss Vance. Mr. Pendleton. Mr. Vance. This is not a game." Arthur offered a calm, dangerous smile. "No, Chair Wilson. Games actually have rules." We walked out into the corridor. For the first time in my life, I wasn't facing trouble all by myself. Back in Studio 9, I explained everything that had happened in his office. Chloe slammed her fist onto a drawing table. "He tried to coerce you into signing a liability waiver?" "It was a very nice fountain pen, though," I added. Silas snatched the pen I had taken out of my pocket. "You stole his pen?" Uncle Barnaby said unattended stationery is public property. Arthur's fingers were flying across his laptop keyboard at blinding speed. "What are you doing?" I asked, leaning over his shoulder. "Digging up every buried file in the university database." Chloe pulled out her phone, scrolling through contacts. My mother is in 3 board member group chats, 2 charity committee circles, and a private parent chat where wealthy adults confess corporate cover-ups because they think sending flower emojis makes it legal. A student in the second row raised his hand. "Can the rest of us help?" Arthur looked up, his eyes sharp. "Yes. Studio 9 has one objective: bring me every scandal the administration ever swept under the rug." A dozen faces in the room completely changed. The childish jokes were gone. Chloe slowly lowered her sunglasses. "Every scandal?" "Every single one." A girl near the easel setup let out a soft laugh. "Chair Wilson is completely cooked." I raised my hand politely. "Should we warn him first?" Chloe looked at me like I had offered to drink paint thinner. "No, sweetie. That ruins the surprise." For the next 3 days, Studio 9 became shockingly productive. Still terrifying, but productive. Arthur called it an ongoing investigation. I called it criminal homework. Silas called it "Don't lay a finger on Beatrix or I'll break your legs," especially after 2 upperclassmen tried to corner me to ask why I was stirring up trouble for the administration. Silas had stood right behind me, and the 2 seniors suddenly remembered they had pressing appointments on the opposite side of campus. Chloe took me shopping after studio hours. I assumed we were buying sketchbooks, but she dragged me into a luxury boutique where a single pair of socks cost more than my family's monthly grocery budget. "No, Chloe," I protested. "Mom said I shouldn't accept expensive gifts." "This isn't a gift. Your current outfit is an insult to my artistic sensibilities." I looked down at Uncle Barnaby's old jacket. "Uncle Barnaby bought this for me." Chloe stopped dead in her tracks. Her lips pressed into a tight line. "Fine," she muttered, pulling a sleek black blazer, a tailored white shirt, and a pleated skirt off the rack. "You can keep the jacket on top. But wear these." "Why?" "Because I'm not a heartless monster, you walking emotional tragedy." I hugged the heavy jacket to my chest. "Thank you, big sister Chloe." "I am not your sister." She swiped her credit card for the whole purchase anyway. Arthur uncovered the goldmine: original maintenance tickets, altered inspection logs, and scanned compliance forms bearing 2 completely different dates. He even unearthed a flagged email from a chief technician warning that the main electrical room should be sealed before someone got injured, alongside a direct reply from Chair Wilson instructing staff not to alarm prospective donors during funding season. Silas located 2 former maintenance workers who had been terrified into silence. I helped by asking them direct questions. "Did Chair Wilson order you to pretend the high-voltage lines were secure before my uncle died?" The first worker dropped his mug onto the tile floor. The second stammered, "Who on earth told you that?" Arthur, hiding behind a vending machine, gave me a subtle thumbs up. "Panicked reactions count as solid evidence," I informed the workers. Both men started sweating profusely. Chloe gathered the inner circle gossip. My aunt confirmed the board knew about the power grid failures since last autumn. They delayed the overhaul because the new digital art pavilion looked much better in the annual brochure. "That is unbelievably foolish," I observed. "Yes. Wealthy adults are remarkably foolish, just with better footwear." Then Chair Wilson took the offensive. A mandatory all-campus assembly was announced. The designated topic: institutional integrity, discipline, and the future of St. Jude Academy. Our professor took one look at the official memo and whispered under his breath, "I completely chose the wrong career path." My name was listed as the primary student speaker. I had zero recollection of agreeing to address the student body. The night before the assembly, my mom called me. "Beatrix, are you doing all right? The administration called saying you've been causing unrest." I made genuine friends. That wasn't what I asked. They might be criminal minds, but they're emotionally supportive criminal minds. Mom went completely silent. Then she whispered that she was taking a bus into town. I tried to convince her not to worry, but she insisted. The following morning, Chloe inspected my appearance like a drill sergeant before battle. "You are not wearing synthetic fibers to a public takedown." "Whose takedown?" I asked. "Spiritually? Chair Wilson's." "Should we inform him?" "No. We discussed this." I wore the new tailored clothes alongside Uncle Barnaby's oversized jacket. The combination looked absurd, but Chloe endured it silently, which meant she truly cared. The main auditorium was packed to capacity. Students crammed into rows, professors pretending not to panic, parents in tailored suits, and board members occupying the front section. Livestream cameras were set up, accompanied by several local journalists whom Chloe's mother had accidentally notified after accidentally leaking a tip. Mom sat near the side aisle, her hands tightly clasped, her eyes rimmed red. I gave her an enthusiastic wave. She looked ready to burst into tears. Department Chair Wilson stepped up to the podium, wearing a smile so artificial even I could spot it from 20 yards away. Students, esteemed faculty, and honored guests, he began into the microphone. St. Jude Academy has always stood upon the pillars of excellence, discipline, and absolute truth. Arthur muttered beside me. He really used the word truth while wearing tailored deception. Chloe coughed into her fist to suppress a laugh. Silas stood behind my chair, arms crossed tightly. When the chair called my name, I walked up onto the stage. My legs felt unusual, not weak, just heavy. The chair placed a firm, reassuring hand on my shoulder. Silas shifted forward in the front row, and the chair immediately withdrew his hand. "Beatrix Vance," Chair Wilson asked smoothly, "do you understand why you were granted a transfer to St. Jude Academy?" I stepped up to the microphone. "Because my uncle died trying to fix your eroded high-voltage grid, and you gave me a scholarship spot so my mom would stop asking questions about the accident report." A massive collective gasp echoed through the entire auditorium. Chair Wilson let out a quick, nervous laugh. "Children often misinterpret complex administrative procedures." "I also misinterpreted my studio assignment," I interrupted plainly. "I thought Studio 9 was just a room number." "My mom told me Studio 1, but I memorized 9. That was my mistake." "But the exposed wiring was yours." Someone in the front row audibly gasped. Chair Wilson's smile stiffened into ice. "Beatrix." The fuse box was rusted through. The safety log was altered. Arthur said that's evidence tampering, but I thought adults called it official paperwork. Noise erupted across the auditorium. Parents stood up from their seats. Professors whispered frantically. Board members turned to face each other in shock. Chair Wilson grabbed the sides of the podium, his face turning pale. "She is confused. This student has a documented history of disruptive behavior." Arthur walked casually up to the technical booth. The massive projection screen behind the stage flickered to life. Original maintenance warnings. Altered inspection logs. High-definition security stills of Uncle Barnaby entering the power vault with his toolbox. Timestamped emails reading, "Do not alarm prospective donors during funding season." The auditorium erupted into absolute chaos. Chair Wilson spun around, his voice cracking. "Turn that display off immediately." Silas stepped right onto the stage, placing himself directly between Chair Wilson and the laptop control cable. "Touch a single cable, and I'll make this assembly extremely interactive." Chair Wilson froze in his tracks. Chloe stood up from the front row, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "My family's donor chat confirms the board discussed power grid failures 3 months ago." Furthermore, board member Ellis wrote, and I quote, "The digital art pavilion opening matters far more than some unsightly utility closet." Screenshots have already been forwarded to every news outlet in the city. A board member let out a sound like a panicked bird. Then, one by one, the students of Studio 9 began standing up. A boy with silver hair raised his phone high. My disciplinary file says I damaged the East Gallery. I didn't. A major donor's son did, and my family accepted the blame to secure my tuition grant. A girl by the aisle stood up next. My probation record was fabricated because the school didn't want parents asking why a professor verbally harassed students. Another student joined in. The sculpture lab fire report was completely falsified. Silas didn't start that fire alone. The gas lines were leaking long before he ever touched a tool. Silas looked away awkwardly. I stared at him, and he pretended the ceiling tiles were deeply fascinating. Arthur took the microphone from the stand, his voice echoing clearly through the hall. Studio 9 is where St. Jude Academy dumps family embarrassments, donor scandals, forged paperwork, and students they want to keep hidden from the glossy brochure. I nodded, stepping closer to the mic, so Studio 9 isn't a dumpster. It's the receipt. Silence fell over the room. Then, someone clapped once. Then another. Within seconds, half the auditorium joined in. Chair Wilson's face turned deep purple. Enough. Beatrix Vance is lying. I tilted my head, looking at him with genuine curiosity. I wish I could lie. It seems extremely convenient for wealthy adults. The applause died down into a stunned, breathless quiet. Then chaos returned, louder and bigger than before. Parents shouted demanding answers, reporters rushed forward with cameras, and faculty members stepped back from Chair Wilson as if his guilt was contagious. He began sweating profusely through his designer suit. "We should handle this privately," he stammered. My chest tightened. Uncle Barnaby's face flashed in my mind, his booming laugh, his crooked smile, his warm hand patting my head after I confessed where he hid his snacks. Honesty is leverage, V. Only genuine people attract real friends. I looked Chair Wilson dead in the eye. "Privately is where you buried my uncle." The simple words hung heavy in the air. Chair Wilson's mouth moved, but no sound came out. The head of the board stood up so abruptly her heavy chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Department Chair Wilson is hereby suspended, pending an immediate criminal and financial investigation." Chair Wilson spun toward her. "Madam Chair, sit down. St. Jude Academy will initiate an independent audit of all safety records, disciplinary files, and Studio 9 logs starting today," she announced to the media cameras. "Beatrix Vance's family will receive a formal public apology and full restitution. Furthermore, we will establish the Barnaby Vance Memorial Safety Fund to guarantee campus-wide infrastructure repairs." Chair Wilson looked like someone had pulled his plug. Campus security officers escorted him down the center aisle. He tried to protest, but not a single person came to his defense. As he was led away, I leaned over toward Chloe. Is he going to stand in the hallway now too? The auditorium lost its collective mind. Even our professor laughed so hard he had to sit on the floor. Mom reached the stage before the reporters could intercept us. She pulled me into a hug so tight I let out a squeak. "Beatrix, did I do something wrong?" I asked softly. She shook her head furiously, tears wetting my shoulder. "No, sweetie. You told the absolute truth. I caused a massive public scene. You told the truth. Uncle Barnaby said that counts as an intense workout." Mom laughed and cried at the same time. Adults were truly confusing. Chloe strutted up to us, pretending her eyes weren't glistening with tears. She declared loudly for the news cameras, the Vance estate will be making a primary contribution to the Barnaby Vance Safety Fund. I gasped in awe. "Big sister Chloe." Her face turned bright red. "I am not your sister. You just donate like one." Arthur covered his mouth to hide his laugh. Silas turned away, his shoulders shaking. Chloe pointed an accusing finger at all of us. "I despise this entire class." "You adore us," Arthur purred. "I will pay to buy your silence." "Too late," I smiled. "I exist." The aftermath transformed the academy completely. Chair Wilson's office was padlocked the very next morning, and his nameplate was gone by noon. Renovations began immediately across every wing. Electricians worked everywhere. Files were audited, and the disciplinary bulletin board was permanently dismantled. The school hosted an official ceremony presenting Mom with a formal apology and a framed photograph of Uncle Barnaby. In the picture, he was wearing dark sunglasses, holding a giant box of donuts, and looking like he was ready to challenge the world to a duel. When the financial settlement arrived later, Mom stared at the numbers for a long time before whispering, "You stubborn, brilliant old man." Studio 9 changed too. We weren't angels, definitely not. Chloe still insulted everyone's taste, Arthur still smiled like a mastermind, and Silas still threatened anyone who bothered me. But the class made me their official lie detector. Beatrix, is my apology genuine? No. Your eyebrows look guilty. Beatrix, do you think my brother is sneaking out tonight? Yes. He saved his girlfriend's contact as dentist. Truth turned out to be remarkably useful. It also meant people brought me snacks constantly. One afternoon, Silas dropped a paper bag onto my desk containing chocolates, a warm sandwich, and a small silver pin shaped like a lightning bolt. Is this protection money? I asked, inspecting the pin. No. Is it emotional compensation? No. Did Chloe tell you my sugar levels drop after afternoon lectures? No. Is this because you have feelings for me? Silas froze so hard I worried he had touched an exposed wire. Arthur whispered from across the aisle, too late. She detected affection. Chloe leaned back in her chair. Oh, this is top-tier drama. Silas snatched at the bag, but I hugged it tightly to my chest. No, public property. That's not how property works, he growled, running a hand through his hair, his face burning bright red. You're not dumb, Vance. I looked up at him. You're just terrifyingly honest. There's a massive difference. My heart did a strange little flutter. So, you like me because I'm scary? His jaw tightened. Unfortunately. Chloe let out a squeal into her hands, and Arthur clapped softly. I snapped the chocolate bar in half and held out a piece. Do you want half? Silas finally looked at me, a soft smile tugging at his lips. Yeah. A month later, St. Jude Academy dedicated a bronze plaque outside the newly repaired power room in memory of Barnaby Vance, who proved that honesty is true leverage. Mom stood on my right. Chloe stood on my left, wearing giant white sunglasses and pretending not to be overwhelmed. Arthur held a folder labeled Future Blackmail, crossed out and replaced with Public Transparency. Silas stood directly behind me, close enough that his sleeve brushed Uncle Barnaby's old jacket on my shoulders. I touched the raised letters on the plaque. Uncle Barnaby, they finally fixed the grid. And I made real friends. Silas's voice came quietly from behind me. I'm still processing the trauma of being called Uncle Silas. Chloe shoved a heavy designer shopping bag into my hands. Protection money. Don't make it emotional. Inside were 3 new outfits, a snack box, and leather boots that cost more than a used car. I grinned, hugging the bag. Thank you, big sister Chloe. I am not your sister. Arthur sighed dramatically. Too late. She exposed your feelings again. Mom wiped a tear and laughed as Silas quietly reached over and took the heavy shopping bag from my arms. I looked up at him. Are you taking my bag because you like me? His ears turned bright red. Unfortunately. I grinned. Uncle Barnaby was right. Honesty was leverage. I used to think he meant physical strength, but it turned out honesty was the kind of power that made dishonest adults sweat through expensive suits. The kind that turned a troubled studio into witnesses. The kind that made forged reports burn under bright spotlights. The kind that gave my uncle his dignity back. They sent me here because I couldn't lie. But when the liars started falling, everyone understood. Honesty was never my flaw. It was the legacy my uncle left me.